Filmmaking is an art of problem solving, and the quality of results that you get from your videos are the direct result of the effectiveness of the solutions that you come up for the issues that you face. Now, if you thought that my channel was just your average tech channel, well, I see why you think that. For the past year or so, that's all I've been doing. But tech is just a way for me to express my creative ambitions and to practice my skills in this visual medium. But what I'm really interested in is this visual medium and how you can tell stories through it. Now, if you're a filmmaker who is looking to enter into narrative filmmaking, it is paramount for you to learn to light a scene without bringing attention to the fact that you have lit the scene. It has to look natural, it has to look real, and it should not look orchestrated. Now, it's actually quite hard to come across because not everybody talks about it. There are people who massively push on this, but most of the people just talk about dynamic range, they talk about the cameras, they talk about the settings, but they don't talk about how to do it. So this is what I wanted to do for a change, and well, since this channel is not called Pranav's Tech or Techie Pranav, I can do this. It's just, yeah. So if you're trying to film a scene like this, where you have the background which is extremely overexposed, if you try to expose my face, it is extremely hard for someone to shoot a dialogue scene here, because if you go for the scenery route and you expose for the outside highlights, well, the faces lose all the definition. They become too dark, and well, you cannot pull out any amount of information from it and make it look salvageable. And especially when you're shooting with budget cameras like the Panasonic G85, which I'm shooting on, and or even your smartphone, it becomes extremely hard for you to get good looking imagery by shooting against sunlight. And if you look at my earlier videos, I recommended using sunlight as your main key light because it is super bright, so you cannot really find lights which are bright enough to fight against sunlight. But there are ways, and if you have the gear and if you have the capability to, shooting against sunlight and lighting the scene by yourself will massively help the outlook of your videos and to make it look quote-unquote cinematic. Now that word is overused, but to look professional. Now this might be extremely orchestrated, and I might have 2 or 3 lights placed here to make this look as good as possible. Or this just might be a natural scene where I've not set up anything, I just set up the camera and the mic and I'm talking to it. Because this balcony extends a bit further and the light bounces onto the wall there and is actually hitting my face. So nothing you're seeing right now is orchestrated. Can you believe that? That is what we all try to achieve natural lighting. And how you can get natural lighting? Well, it is called motivated lighting, where the physical location where you're placing the lights, there should be a meaning behind why you place the lights at that specific point, and there should be a meaning behind what the quality and the color of light is. So in this case, the main source of light is sunlight, and I don't want to fight sunlight, I want to augment it. Now, the best way you can augment sunlight is something called rolling it around. Especially if you're shooting like this, the sun is exactly right there. So if you're shooting against the sun, you have to make it seem that sunlight is somehow lighting me from the front. So one way you can do it is to wrap that sunlight around. That is, take that light, reflect it or augment by placing a light along the direction to make a scene that light is actually rolling around and hitting my face. So this scene that you're seeing right now is completely orchestrated because this camera neither does not have the dynamic range to keep both the outside highlights and my face in exposure, and also, well, this room isn't big enough for the sunlight to be pulling around my face like this. There is a massive key light right here just off camera, which is placed at such an angle to make it seem that this window, this balcony is extending further and it is pulling the light over me. And that is a very natural method to light your scenes because you're literally augmenting the sunlight. You're adding to it rather than fighting it. And for this case, you don't need very bright lighting because you're again augmenting or going along with sunlight rather than trying to fight it. If the sun is coming from this direction, if you set up your lights here, it will look extremely awkward because what is supposed to be the brightest source you can find, the sun, is acting as your backlight. So for you to be able to discern your facial expressions, you would have to have a much brighter light lighting yourself. And it just wouldn't look natural, it will look extremely orchestrated, and it will just look like you just placed the light there, even though you might even reflect the sunlight on your face. But if you augment the light by placing it along a similar direction to the sunlight, well, it looks extremely natural. Right now, the sunlight could be streaming into this room, it could be hitting a wall there, and it could be bouncing onto my face, and it looks extremely natural. It does not look weird. And well, that is the thing we're going for when we're trying to make movies, because the moment people start obsessing over how you shot it instead of what you shot, that film loses its value. Especially if you're working on smaller budget short films or just smaller budget movies in general. You want the people to be immersed in the story and the method you use to tell the story, not how you shot it. So, but still, as I said, this camera does not have the dynamic range to keep the highlights and the shadows in exposure. And even though I have placed the light here, it still doesn't look that good because all the light in the scene is towards this side. So the other half of my body just fades into darkness. So to prevent that, I have placed a secondary light just off screen that is lighting me up from this side so as to give me a bit of definition. It is not as bright as the light in front of me so that it just doesn't overpower. It is just there to stop me from blending into the background and looking weird.